My name is Kyle. So I'll be starting with in-person classes here on Saturdays at 5 o'clock at Smiley Building here in Durango, Colorado. You're more than welcome to come. That's Saturdays at 5. I do Mondays meditations at 8 p.m. Mountain Time. So please join if you'd like. The first principle in spirituality is peace. The great peace is the oneness of experience, the oneness of awareness. So, what is your direct experience of peace? What is your direct experience of peace? There are different characteristics of peace. The first is silence. Can you be aware that this ambiance is full of silence? Is there ever a time where this peaceful silence is not here? Is it possible for there to be this exact silence when there are cars driving by, dogs barking, you're in school, you're at work, at a coffee shop? Is there still this silence around? Because I'm going to say that if you really go into your direct experience and you cultivate this connection with the silence in meditation, then you see that you can go out into life and see and notice that it's always here. It's always here. So that even a city is full of silence. I have some notes here, so I'm going to just kind of keep going. So, again, what is your direct experience of peace? And there's kind of two aspects to your direct experience. The first thing is you might notice that silence might be empty. There might be an emptiness to the silence, like it's void. It's void of noise, it's void of life. But the other aspect is that it's actually full of abundance, full of life. So if that's the case, then is silence like dead or living? We might feel or hear that silence is like a dead thing, like it's the absence of life, it's the absence of noises. But especially, for example, if you are out in nature, in the mountains, on the beach, there's this alive silence. There's this alive silence that is imbued in nature. That is what like nature is almost made of. It's the background to all of these marvelous experiences that we can have in nature. So imagine a time where you felt the most at peace in nature. And now imagine that being the background of your experience walking down the street. This is true non duality. This is true oneness. Seeing that our deepest experiences aren't just mere experiences, they are reality. And I know the hustle and bustle of cities can be rather distracting. Cities kind of remind us of our egos, our culture. But again, like if there is one great silence, it is always here and it's everywhere. And the next thing on my notes here is that it is a healing space. So, like, again, if you're out in nature, you're going to feel the silence fully enter the body, and it's going to begin to heal. It's going to calm the central nervous system. It's going to invite us to remember our history, and not just in the mind, but like living how we lived for 90% of our history as human beings. So silence again it is healing. All these noises, they in the city, they tend to like aggravate the central nervous system. And going and returning to the city, but from a place of silence, is how wisdom approaches living in a city. And it's really hard to know this silence in a city if we've never experienced it out in nature. If we've never, I'm talking about like deep into nature, on the top of a mountain, on a remote beach, in the middle of the desert, these kinds of places, far from civilization. And then carrying that in our central nervous system and our cellular memory, our awareness, and then returning to work, returning to the city, and remembering that this is the essence and that all these movements are actually happening in and as this piece. The next thing I have is space. So peace is silence and peace is space. And space is not just this immediate vicinity, but challenging awareness to be vast, to be expansive, to be infinite. And the best metaphor is the physical universe. Ultimately, physicality isn't the only version of reality. But if we imagine the amount of space as the universe is, this is like the essence of our awareness. So, can you feel this like infinite, expansive space that is peaceful consciousness? It should, release maybe trauma, things like this from the nervous system, tensions, anxieties. When we see that, oh, I am this space. The space is what my awareness is. It's very relieving and beautiful to know this. And the body really likes this space. The nervous system really likes it. Um, yeah, like I said, the anxiety just kind of flows through us and out of us, this stuck energy. And this space is what the mind is, this universe. Ultimately, again, it's not physical, but you can now imagine that this infinite space includes the physical and the non-physical, but it's actually the same thing. There's no separation at all between the spiritual universe and the physical universe. Or you can say like it's all just spiritual. It's all spiritual. And this beautiful space um, is what the mind is. It's where intelligence downloads information into. This is what your brain is actually connected to as human intelligence. So really there is one like there's one great silence, there's one great mind. There's one intelligence, and it's something that is tuned into. It's something that is downloaded, something that is descending from infinite intelligence. So it's like infinite intelligence is spreading and like literally downloading into the human brain, into the human mind. And again, but there's no really no separation between like your separate mind and the mind of everything else. And the mind is like it does in a sense have a center point, even though it's like ultimately this infinite space, and that's in the third eye area. So the third eye area is really in the center of the skull, right in the center of the skull. And it's important to take that half step back from our normal, everyday, old awareness that we're taught at school and at church and from our families, that this is what it means to be a human being is like to be logical, problem solve, worry, plan. That's all happening here. I believe that's like the prefrontal cortex. But we're stepping back behind the eyeballs in the center of the brain, and then your awareness can be vast, like a lighthouse. So you know how lighthouses look in 360 degrees, but not just we're not just looking in one direction and changing. It's like peripheral. So I have that also in my notes here. Is like the third eye is actually in its nature peripheral awareness. And the metaphor is peripheral vision, but peripheral awareness is being almost like horizontal in all, forwards, backwards, left, right. And then eventually we can practice also going up and down, into the body, into the earth, and into the heavenly realms. But for now, we're just imagining that, at the center of our skull, our awareness is spreading throughout the universe from this central node of intelligence and space. And awareness and peace is also inside the body as well as outside. And there's this oneness of space, right? There's not like infinite space can be divvied up, right? It's like there is only infinite space and it's everywhere and it is what everything is. So therefore, people tend to think of peace as being, like world peace. So we experience not war, we experience silence, we experience stillness in nature. But ultimately, like, this body, this body is nature, right? So in a sense, we're around nature all the time because we're around each other. And the natural state of the body is to emanate peace, to be peace. It was a pretty wild experience the first time I noticed that this body began to be made of peace. It really felt like for a long time, I didn't even know it, but my body was made of tension. And of course, there's still tension in my body, of course. What I'm saying is to begin to see that the nature of the body is actually peace. and begin to experience this with the thigh, like your thighs becoming peace, your skull becoming peace. And then it is mirrored out in reality, like outside in reality, as well as inside the body as reality. This gorgeous oneness. Let's see what else I got here. So the next is the practice of self-inquiry. So seeing the self as peace. And as Ramana Maharshi taught, you maintain awareness at the sense of I, the sense of I am. And it's like you have this I awareness, and you begin to see your facade first and foremost. You begin to see that like your ego is what you always thought that you were, but then you stay with the I, and then it kind of begins to slowly, like this stuff takes decades of practice, of course, begins to dissolve, begins to be incorporated into the oneness, and then you begin to see that, oh, I am awareness, I am peace, I am silence. And this thing that I thought I was is just an aspect of this reality. It's certainly not my main teaching to do self-inquiry, but there's a lot of useful tools, and self-inquiry works for many people. Yeah, it's a beautiful practice. So I haven't talked a lot about this stillness either. So, there was one night where I was camping in Colorado here before I moved to Colorado, and where I was at, it was like this campsite where I was camping on a guy's land, and he had like this cabin that was run by a generator, and this was in the middle of nowhere. And one night there was no wind, and the generator turned off, and it was the first time that I experienced like absolute silent stillness. And like there was the silence came with an absolute, like, felt like it was the stillness of the universe. And I began to see that, of course, this is actually the background of reality, and that actually stillness is what the universe is made of. Because it seems like there's things before that. It was like everything is just moving. Everything is just moving. There's only movement. But what happens when there's kind of a standstill? You begin to have a thought-free mind, and it really feels like time, space, almost like collapse or pause. It really feels like a pause. And so in a sense, like there is this background of reality where everything is constantly on pause. And that's what silent stillness is. Let's see. It looks like I've said most things. But to reemphasize is like the becoming. It no longer becomes just something that you experience. It's no longer like, right now I'm experiencing peace, or right now I'm experiencing love. Next time when I teach about love, but you begin to see that it's what you are. So it's like you experience it more and more often, and it almost becomes like, I just want to experience this peace as much as I possibly can. Putting yourself in these situations like retreats or nature, you experience it so often, and then you begin to see it's actually the aspect of what I am, and not just an aspect, but like your nature. And then ultimately you do see that it's simply an aspect, but it's an absolute aspect, not just something that comes and goes. It's an absolute in and of itself, this peace, this love. Each of these is an aspect of the divine reality. But again, step one is this peace, quietude. So, what are some characteristics of this peace? First, I say it's absolute, it's objective, it's everywhere and always. So, that's the next thing, too, is it's omnipresent. It's like everywhere and always. And it's actually what everything is, occurring as. It's infinite. Like I said, it's expansive, it's timeless, it's what space is, and eternal. It's time. It's so timeless that it's eternal. Um, the last could be a practice. Is the mind of the modern person is so active, and it's active with stuff that we don't really need. Let's take planning for example. So much time and energy we take to plan into the future. But it usually comes from anxiety. Like you're trying to create the future into what the ego wants. But if you've noticed throughout your life, like usually the ego tends to bring you a lot of stress, a lot of like mental problems. And that, the universe we're living in is it's God's universe, it's divinity's universe. And so we the last thing I want to say is like having attention at the feet is very far from the mind physically, and it really you begin to see that your feet are made of peace. The space that they're in is made of peace. It's far from the mind, so you begin to experience thought-free peace. And this is a great practice to try, and I advocate for that practice. And it's a great like beginner's practice. We're all beginners in a sense. So, but this is a great place to start if you haven't meditated before. Maintaining awareness at the feet. Eventually, you'll begin to see that your feet are peace, or even made of light. And so, whenever you're out in the world getting stressed, sometimes I just like return my awareness down to my feet, getting far from these like human thoughts and this place of like kyleness up here. It's like, oh yeah, there's lots of space here. There's awareness at my feet, below my feet, way above my head as well, but it's a good place to start. Good place to start. So I'm gonna end that here. So I wish peace for you, for your life, and for the United States of America after this election, China, India, all these countries. May there be peace, not just physical peace, but absolute peace, now and forevermore. Thank you. Have a good day.